Hello, and welcome to the introduction for the Peter David panel at the end of DragonCon 2014. Peter David once told the story that upon hearing his name mentioned at a DragonCon programming meeting, one of the programmers was remarked to say, "Peter David, he's the last guy I want to see." And somebody simply marked down, "Last guy," and he wound up doing the final panel. And for years, decades, I think, Peter David has done the final panel at DragonCon. This is the end of the Star Trek track at DragonCon 2014, in which Peter David discusses his new run on Deadpool, his new series doing Spider-Man 2099, how he recovered from a stroke and wound up getting more work doing Stephen King's Dark Tower series, and a few other things along the way, including a reading from his book Artful, where the Artful Dodger winds up with an interesting profession in his later years. Anyway, there is one point along the way where the action abruptly stops after Peter David says, "Please don't post this on social media." Well, I didn't post it on social media. Anyway, I am Declan Finn, and the following presentation is brought to you by A Pious Man, A Pious Legacy, and Codename Winterborn. Enjoy!
I'm a little bit out of breath. Okay. That walk from the hive used to be a lot easier. I used to be younger and I hadn't had a stroke and everything was good. All right. Hi. How you all doing? This is the last panel of DragonCon, is it? Or where's the last Trek panel?
This is the last panel.
Oh, okay.
DragonCon this year has made a statement that all programming ends at 2:30 because the host hotels require extra time for cleanup.
Extra time? Why? Because they have another convention coming in.
They just want us out earlier than normal, and it's a new time.
Probably want us out Saturday, but...
No, they wouldn't.
All right, yeah, because I was wondering, it said his panel's at 2:30. I'm going, really? Yay. Okay. Well, first off, thank you all for coming. It's wonderful to see you here. I'm not entirely sure how it became traditional that I'd wind up doing this last panel. All I can say is that one year when I wasn't scheduled to do the last panel, I got tons of complaints from people about why aren't you doing the last panel? And I said, I don't know who's in charge of scheduling. They said, Garrett Wang. And I went, really? And they went, okay. So I then went to one of the costume masquerades, and I found myself sitting directly behind Garrett Wang. And I said, "Hi, I'm Peter David. I usually do the last panel for Star Trek, and you came in charge, and suddenly I'm not doing it. What's up with that?" And lo and behold, he put me back. So, that worked out. I usually start off with a reading, and today will be no exception. I'm going to be reading to you from my latest book. It's called Artful. Now, for those of you who have heard me say this during the convention, I apologize in advance. A few years ago, I was reading Oliver Twist. I don't know why, but I was reading Oliver Twist. And I started to notice some curious things about Fagin. He never goes outdoors during the daytime. He doesn't eat anything. He doesn't drink anything. Bill Sykes actually buys him a drink in a pub, commenting on the fact that he's never seen Fagin drink anything. And Fagin proceeds to not drink the drink that Bill Sykes bought him. And, most tellingly, at one point he's described as having no teeth at all, except for a pair of fangs like a dog's. And I'm reading all this and I went, holy crap! Fagin's a vampire. We must hunt him. So I conceived a book called Artful. which covers the adventures of the Artful Dodger. He's about around 18, 19 years old at this point, a few years older than he was when he was in Oliver Twist. And he winds up being sucked into a vampiric conspiracy in London town. Now at this point, his only companion is a teenage girl who has introduced herself as Alexandrina. Her full name, which Artful does not know, is Alexandrina Victoria. She is 17 years old, and on her 18th birthday, she's going to become Queen Victoria. But at the moment, she's out and about in London trying to get a first-hand knowledge of what her subjects are like. She has fallen in with Artful for reasons I won't bother to go into. And at this point in the story, Oliver has learned from a resident prostitute, a young lady in the area, that a young boy had come looking for him, an 8-year-old boy. And then this prostitute's phone rings. Okay? I was supposed to have theater on Broadway, and someone's phone behind me started ringing. And the person in front of me turned and glared at me, and I went... The best, I took Caroline to see a movie called We Bought a Zoo. And we're sitting there in a packed movie theater, and there's these 3 elderly women sitting behind me. And I start hearing one of their cell phones going off. And it's getting louder, and louder, and louder. And it's not flipping to voicemail. And I finally couldn't take it anymore. And I turned to her and I said, "Would you please turn off your cell phone?" And she says, "It's ringing?" Okay, at any rate, so this 8-year-old boy came looking for the Dodger. The prostitute sent him on his way by telling him that the Dodger actually hangs out at a pub nowhere near where they are. Because her assumption is that the young boy was actually sent by the police to try and find the Dodger so he could be arrested. It's something that the police have pulled. Alexandrina finds this awful and says to the Artful, "Well, you should help the boy if he needs help." And the Artful Dodger, not entirely sure why, decides to take her advice. And he and Alexandrina are now going to go in search of the young boy. Okay. He saw a hackney rolling their way from behind, empty of passengers. Without hesitation, he let go of her hand and waved his arms to flag it down. The driver made eye contact with him and, flicking his whip, prepared to send the horse-drawn cab barreling right past, clearly unimpressed by the youth who was endeavoring to catch his attention. Drina, what he calls her, short for Alexandrina. Drina looked from the Artful to the driver, and then she took in a breath and called out a single word, an order, in a voice that would not allow for even the slightest possibility of being ignored. "Halt!" Reflexively, automatically, the driver yanked hard on the reins, forcing the horse to a stop so abruptly that the animal let out a startled and irritated whinny of protest. Without waiting for the driver to clamber down, Drina strode forward and yanked open the door. "Get in," she said to the Artful, and then fixed an angry glare upon the driver. "Is that what you consider proper business conduct? Ignoring a customer who is endeavoring to engage your services?" The driver looked taken aback. "Sorry, miss," he said. "Didn't mean nothing by it, just meant to be a bit of a laugh." Icily, she said, "We are not amused." They clambered in, and the Artful Dodger gave quick instructions. The driver sent the horse speeding down the King's Way, while Dodger kept his eyes upon the road in front of them, scanning the walks, trying to catch a glimpse of the lad that he was certain they would overtake. He did take time, however, to glance toward Drina. The heat of the moment having passed, she seemed ever so slightly contrite. "I hope you're not upset," she said, "that I did that." "You mean take charge?" "Yes." No, you were brilliant," he said in wonderment. I think it's good you're strong." He looked away from her then and said softly, "I cared about 2 women in my life, my mum and a girl named Nancy. Both of them were gentle souls. Both of them paid for it with their lives. World don't seem to welcome gentle souls. You stay strong, you take charge, and you can meet the world on its own terms, which means maybe you won't go the way they did. That's fine with me. Mr. Dawkins, said Drina, that may be the most sincere thing I've heard you say. I'm flattered and intrigued, to be honest. Are you insinuating that you care about... There, said the Artful Dodger abruptly. Pull over, there. Just ahead of them, approaching the broken nail, was a boy who exactly matched the description that Mary, she's the prostitute, had provided them. He was moving with quick, steady strides, his arms pumping furiously. It was remarkable how much distance those little legs could consume. And then two men seemed to come out of nowhere and grab the boy by either arm. They were cloaked in brown Inverness capes and were ragged and tatty around the edges. The boy let out a startled yelp and tried to pull away, but they easily hoisted him off his feet and carried him off into the darkness of a nearby alley. For half a heartbeat, the Artful was back in his young mind from years ago, and he saw his mother struggling in a similar dark alley. He remembered his cowardice, being frozen with indecision and fear, and doing nothing as she died. Not again, he snarled. Not this time. Without further hesitation, he bolted out the side of the hansom cab as it rolled up, swinging his walking stick down and around at the head of the nearer of the two men. Dodger, be careful, Drina cried out. There was a sharp crack, and Dodger landed on the sidewalk, looking up at the man whom he had bludgeoned with his cane, only to find the man was looking down at him without the slightest indication of any injury. A clang alerted Dodger to dart his eyes downward, where he saw the heavy metal head of the cane landed on the street, having snapped clean off. Let him go, shouted the boy, struggling furiously in the hands of the man who was holding him. Don't hurt anyone because of me. His voice sounded odd, foreign. Clearly he was not English, and that crime alone was sufficient to prompt the Artful to wonder why he was bothering. Both men had, there was no other way to say it, evil faces. They had distended brows, small, ferocious eyes, and scraggly black hair, coupled with a stench like the dead coming off them. One of them said to the boy, "You should have thought of that before you run off." Meanwhile, the one who had shown no ill effects from Dodger's assault reached down and grabbed the Artful by the front of his shirt, yanking him off his feet as if he weighed nothing. "And you, little man," he said in a thick Scots brogue, bringing the Artful face to face with him. "You'll pay for that." Indeed, his breath was so foul that the Artful Dodger thought he was already paying for it. "Release him! At once!" Drina's voice thundered. But unlike the cab driver, the man who was holding Dodger was not overwhelmed by an urge to obey her. In fact, he seemed nothing but entertained, until he turned and looked at her as she leaned out of the side of the cab. Then his jaw dropped, his eyes widened, and he was clearly stunned by what he saw. At that point, the Artful did the only thing he could think of doing. He pursed his lips, sucked in his cheeks, and let fly a huge wad of spit directly in his assailant's face. The hope was that it would startle him sufficiently that he would lose his grip on the young thief, allowing Dodger to slip free. Instead, it had a far more profound impact than Dodger could possibly have anticipated. The moment the saliva struck his face, the man let out a screech like unto a howl of the damned. The liquid did not simply run down his face. Instead, it began to eat right into it with a sizzling and hissing, and the foul smell of the man's breath was obliterated by a brand new aroma, the stench of burning flesh. He dropped the Artful as he staggered backward and then fell, clutching at his face, thrashing about like a fish just landed on a pier. "What the bleeding Christ did you do?" shouted the other man, the one who was holding the boy. And the truth was that Dodger had absolutely no idea, but he knew one thing and one thing only, and that was that something that had worked once might well work again. He wadded up and spit once more, although this did not strike as directly as the first one had. Instead, it grazed the other man's cheek, but it was sufficient to cause him extreme pain. The ruffian staggered, grabbing at his face and letting out a string of profanities, but he still clutched the boy. The Artful grabbed the man's hand and spat on it, and it had the same effect as his spit had had upon their faces, causing the skin on the back to sizzle. Now the man released the boy, grabbing at his own wrist, and Dodger seized the boy's hand and yanked him toward himself. In his other hand, he was still clutching the remains of his walking stick, and he ran toward the hansom cab, hauling the boy behind him. He as much as hurled the boy bodily into the cab, even as he shouted, "Go! Go!" The driver had observed everything that had happened with eyes the size of 2 half-crown coins. But the moment the Artful and the boy were in the cab, he snapped the reins and yelled, "Yah!" at the top of his lungs. The horse wheeled around and started barreling down the King's Way. "What happened back there?" asked Karina. She seemed out of breath, although that might well have been from the excitement of what she had just witnessed. "Dodger, what happened?" "I don't know. Honest to God, I have no idea." "Dodger?" said the boy. "You're the Artful Dodger?" "The same." Reflexively, Dodger tipped his hat, even as he felt his mind was whirling. "What did you do to them?" Trina was still looking stunned. "I spat on them. I spat on them and it burned them somehow. How is that possible?" "Pardon what may seem a ridiculous question," said the boy, "but you haven't been drinking holy water by any chance, have you?" "Holy water?" said Trina, before Dodger could answer. "That's ridiculous. Why would he be drinking holy water?" Then her voice trailed off and she looked at him with suspicion. "Wait, the tea you made that we drank." "The water was just sitting there in the spout," he said defensively. "You stole water from a church to make tea?" "Well, it's not like I was impersonating a choker and going around and using it to baptize babies and charge her to quit for it." "That's not the point, a choker." "Priest," he said, motioning to his neck to indicate a collar. And before Trina could start up with her recriminations once more, he quickly turned his attentions back to the boy. "What difference would it make what I was drinking?" "It probably won't last for long. A few hours from now, your saliva will be back to normal. But for the moment, there was enough residue in your spit to be effective against them," said the boy. "Effective how?" said Trina. "I don't understand. Who were those villains?" "Not who. What?" The boy said very darkly with much drama and pronouncement. "Vampires." Trina and the Artful Dodger exchanged looks. Dodger didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the notion. "Vampires?" said Trina slowly. "You cannot be serious." "Serious is the graveness," he said. "Those 2 took me prisoner, held me captive." "And that makes them vampires?" "No, the fact that they are undead, drink blood, and are burned by holy water makes them vampires." "But there's no such thing," said the Artful. They're myths and stories and things that parents try to scare their children with." "There are such things," the boy said firmly, "and there's more of them than you think, and they are more highly placed and in positions of influence than you can imagine, which is why we cannot trust anyone in authority." "Well, I'm with you in that regard at least," said Dodger. "Still, you can't think that—" "Bloody hell!" It was a startled exclamation from the driver above. Immediately, Dodger leaned out the side to look up and see what was happening, and then he gaped at what he saw. The second blackguard, the one whom Dodger had slowed but not badly injured, was running after the speeding carriage. Not just running, bounding, as if he were a great jungle cat, and he was overtaking it. Yet with all that before him and all the boy had said, still the Artful Dodger was having trouble grasping the reality of what he was seeing, precisely because it all seemed so utterly unreal. But the threat presented seemed real enough, and Dodger shouted, "Faster! Faster!" The horse needed no urging from its driver, for there was terror in the creature's eyes. The carriage turned sharply onto Great Queen Street, losing a bit of speed in the turn, but able to take advantage of the greater width of the road. Their pursuer drew closer, and his claw-like fingers almost reached the cab. Then the cab picked up speed and barreled down Great Queen, heading toward Long Acre Road. I actually sat there with a map of when Victoria charted this all out. So, detailed it. Their pursuer drew close. Okay, right. Then the cab picked up speed and barreled down Great Queen, heading toward Long Acre Road. Their pursuer seemed to be falling back, and within moments Dodger was certain he would lose his taste for the chase. Dodger sagged back in his seat, the handsome cab, not precisely designed for high speeds, swaying wildly back and forth as it sped down the road. "I think we've lost him," he said, and that was the moment that Trina let out with a scream of alarm, because her pursuer was right there, right next to them, having picked up speed with apparently no effort whatsoever, and was now clinging to the side of the hansom cab. His arm was thrust into the cab, and he was clawing at Trina, trying to yank her bodily out of it. She cried out, trying to pull loose from his grip, but he was clearly too strong. The Artful Dodger tried to wad up more spit, but his mouth was dry. He lunged forward, yanking at the villain's hands, trying to force him off, and his appearance seemed to change as his fury mounted upon seeing Dodger. His eyes were blazing and unearthly red, and his lips were drawn back to reveal fangs that would have been more at home in the mouth of a snarling beast. That was when Dodger saw that as Drina had endeavored to pull free of the villain, who was trying to yank her from the cab, a jeweled necklace had slipped out from under her bodice. Dangling from a string of purple beads was a but remembering the ancient tales that he had heard, Dodger grabbed the cross and yanked it free of the beads. It snapped off and he held the cross up directly before the intruder's eyes. The fierce eyes widened and the creature hissed, reflexively drawing back, allowing just enough slack in his grasp for the Artful to yank Drina away from him. But there was not much room in the cabin. With a roar of fury, overcoming his initial revulsion to the cross, the monster yanked open the door, presenting the entirety of his body as he prepared to climb in and do the Lord only knew what to the passengers. And it was at that moment that the boy, a youth still in his short pants, grabbed up Dodger's cane, or the remnants of the cane, which was now little more than a long wooden pole with a jagged point, and thrust forward with all the strength his small but determined body possessed. The villain, clinging to the cab, had only a moment's warning, and that was insufficient, as the lad drove the wooden shaft into the attacker's chest with surgical precision. One would have thought that such an effort would have required considerable power, perhaps even a hammer, to drive it in with finality. Not so. It punched through the creature's chest as easily as through a wall of cheapest plaster, and straight into the pathetic, shriveled thing that passed for his heart. He let out a high-pitched shriek, and there, before the eyes of the stunned youngsters in the coach, although in actuality only 2 sets of eyes were stunned, whereas the third set knew all too well what it was looking upon, the body began to desiccate as if 1,000 years of existence were passing within a few scant seconds. His burning red eyes receded entirely into his head, leaving nothing but blackened sockets. His gums peeled back and his fangs fell out. The flesh upon his head shriveled and revealed the skull beneath, and then that burned away as if being consumed from the inside out. With a final low, mournful howl, the pursuer fell away from the cab, hitting the ground as nothing more than a sack of clothing with some bones within. The youngsters barely had time to adjust to what they had witnessed before the hansom cab jolted to a halt. They were thrown about, Dodger slamming into Drina and apologizing profusely for doing so. They jumped then, startled, crying out as another dark form appeared at the door. But this time it was the driver who was shouting, "What the bloody hell have you got me drug into?" "Here now, there's a lady present," the Artful said. "No need for such language." The driver stared at them stupefied, and then the young man who had stabbed Dodger's cane into their attacker said with supreme calm, "There shouldn't be any more attackers, at least not for now. All will be well. But we'd be advised to gain some distance until we can plan our next move." He fixed his stare upon his companions. "Are you beginning to believe more in vampires now?" "It would seem problematic not to," admitted Drina. "But who are you?" "Abraham. Abraham Van Helsing. My friends call me Brock." Yeah, I figured, Dracula takes place in the late 1800s, so in the 1830s, when this book is set, Abraham Van Helsing would be about 8 years old. And, I'm figuring, why not? So yes, we've got Dracula in here, we've got Abraham Van Helsing. Dracula is in the book, although he does not play a major part. Fagin's in there. We have the Baker Street Irregulars. Now remember, this is all pre-Sherlock Holmes. But I figure there's nothing in the Holmes books that say the Baker Street Irregulars were formed just for Sherlock Holmes. So I figured that the Baker Street Irregulars are a gang that have been around for decades. Why not? So that's currently available. It was published by Amazon Press. The book came out the 1st of July and it sold very well. And I'd like if you could all order it so that we can jump back to number 1 with the bestsellers list. We got as high as number 3. So, that's not bad. But if everyone orders it, we'll go back up. Currently also since this is a Star Trek panel, I should tip my hat to Star Trek in answer to a question that I get every freaking year. Yes, we're doing more New Frontier books. I've signed a contract with Pocket Books to do 3 more New Frontier. And I'm very happy about that. And we are picking up directly after the end of Blind Man's Bluff. So those of you who've been waiting 4 freaking years to find out what happens next, all you have to do is wait a little while longer, like until I write them. And then you'll get to find out. It's really going to be fun to be back with the cast and Captain Calhoun and that whole crew. So that's going to be entertaining. What else am I working on? Okay, I'm going to tell you something that I could have mentioned earlier at the convention, and I did not because I didn't want to bring anybody down. But this is the last panel, and then you're all going to go home. I won't have to deal with people coming up to me during the convention and asking me about this. Marvel has decided to cancel X Factor. I like the intake of that. Yeah, I mean, the sales are exactly what you would expect from an X book that does not have Wolverine or Cyclops. And from my understanding, a lot of fans read the first issue and said, wow, we really like this first issue, and we're going to be sure to buy this when it comes out in trade paperback. Because a lot of fans are still not making the connection that if you don't buy the book on a monthly basis, there will not be trade paperbacks. Why? Because we're going to cancel the damn book. It's frustrating to me because I have so many people coming up to me and telling me that they love they love what I'm doing with Gambit, and they love what I'm doing with Quicksilver and Polaris. I have Doug Ramsey fans coming up to me and thanking me for bringing back Doug. Astoundingly, I even have people coming up to me going, I never really liked Danger very much, but wow, I really like her now. So I think, when you're writing a book that gets largely positive rave reviews and has people saying it's the best X book out there, as a writer, you feel like you're pretty much doing everything you can. And you can't put a gun to people's heads and force them to buy your comic book. I know because there was a law. I looked it up. Apparently it's called assault with a deadly weapon. It is in fact frowned upon. So as much as I would like to keep the book going, assault with a deadly weapon does not really seem like a major option. We will be concluding the book with issue number 20. I have absolutely no idea how I'm concluding the book because I hadn't planned on it. I will, however, before issue 20, or maybe even with issue 20, be revealing the secret truth behind Harrison Snow and who he is and what he is in fact up to with Serval. So that will answer that question. And I will be revealing it in a very unexpected manner. We will also be having some interesting guest stars coming up. Gorgon from the Inhumans will be showing up in the next issue, rather pissed off with Quicksilver. Also, we're going to be having two major mutants who will be coming into battle with X Factor. One of whom is a member of the previous X Factor team. No, it's not Natrox. Okay. And Spider-Man 2099 will be making a guest appearance. I have not mentioned that anywhere else yet. So that should be entertaining. So unless there is some major change, like basically suddenly retailers start ordering double what they usually get on X Factor, issue 20 will be the last issue. Okay? That's the way that goes, and the previous, people say, we love Gambit. Guess what? His previous book got canceled because not enough people were buying it. I now have a book where Gambit is our major lead character, and it's getting canceled because not enough people are buying it. I appreciate the fact that everybody loves Gambit. We need to have double the number of people who currently love him buying his damn books. Okay? I don't have control over that. You guys have control over that. So if you want to go nuts on various websites and everything and say save X Factor, buy double the number of copies you're getting, go right ahead. If Marvel comes to me and says, hey, we're going to be doing it, we're going to continue doing it, I'm happy. Okay. However, I continue to do work for Marvel Comics. Spider-Man 2099 is canceled. No, I'm kidding. That was fun. What happened was that Steve Wacker made a joke in his Parting Letters comic about how editor Ellie Pyle was working on a Spider-Man 2099 ongoing title. No, she wasn't. Okay? What she was doing was kicking around the possibility of a limited series that would spin out of the upcoming Spider-Verse series. Okay? But everyone took Wacker 100% seriously. And the fan response on what I would have to say is a rare occasion for the internet was unanimous. Everybody said the following two things. I will totally buy a Spider-Man 2099 ongoing series as long as Peter David is writing it. I mean, everyone said that. And I got deluges of emails from people going, are you writing the new Spider-Man 2099 book? And I wrote back to everyone going, no. Marvel hasn't said anything to me about it. I'm sure they're going to get someone who's a perfectly good writer. And the original concept, like I said, was I was going to spin out of the Spider-Verse as a limited series for like 3 issues or something. And they were going to get this some new writer to come in and write it. He uses a testing thing for him and all that kind of thing. And the powers that be at Marvel were looking at the response they were getting, and they were going, why are we doing this as a limited series spinning out of the Spider-Verse? Why don't we start it as an ongoing series and have it lead into and out of Spider-Verse and keep it going as an ongoing series? And by the way, Peter David works for us. Why don't we have Peter David writing? So I get a call from Ellie Pyle going, Peter, so Spider-Man 2099, would you like to write it? I'm going, yeah, okay. Well, I'm really going to have to reverse myself to all the people I said I wasn't doing it. I said, well, when's the first issue going to come out? She says, July. I went, July? It's March. Well, and you're usually 3 months ahead when you're writing a comic book. I'm going, it's March now. And she said, yeah, you're late. And also, we need a 5-page Spider-Man story to be in the first issue of the new Amazing Spider-Man title, and we need that now. Well, which is great, because I haven't thought creatively about Spider-Man 29 in a mere 15 years or so. So it's okay, sure. And I banged out a 5-page story, having absolutely no clue what it was going to be about, and then immediately launched into the ongoing book, having absolutely no clear idea what it's going to be about. So I'm having lots of fun. Making this crap up as I go. So the first 2 issues are out. The next issues 3 and 4 are going to be a 2-parter that features him going up against the Scorpion. So that should be entertaining. Issue 5 is then going to lead into the Spider-Verse crossover. And I gotta tell you, the Spider-Verse crossover is going to be fantastic. Every Spider-Man you have ever seen anywhere is going to be in this series. Every single one. We're going to have Peter Porker, the spectacular Spider-Man, looking at Spider-Monkey going, that's messed up. We're going to have the Ralph Bakshi Spider-Man for the 1960s animated series. The one who usually swung with his webbing attached to absolutely nothing. We're going to have the Japanese Spider-Man. We're going to have... Yes, we're going to have the Indian Spider-Man. We're having the Ultimate Spider-Man is going to be in there. Every freaking guy except for Ultimate Dead Peter Parker. Ultimate Dead Peter Parker is, to my knowledge, not in it. Sorry, guys. Okay? But the other Ultimate Spider-Man will be in there. So, that's pretty good. Every single Spider-Man is going to be in this. And I'm having a field day. And in issue 6, he will be back in 2099. Okay? That doesn't mean he will necessarily stay in 2099. But, it should be fun. Hold on, let me just check something. It's not 701. What the hell? What time is it?
3:01.
3:01. Okay. My Kindle's off by a mere 4 hours. I got this for free. Because Amazon published Artful, and one day I get a box from Amazon. I'm going, I wonder what's in the box. I crack it open. It's a Kindle. It's like, here's your free Kindle. Like, wow! And it's like a Kindle Fire. It's like the best one on the market. And they sent it to me for free. I'm so thrilled. Do I want to shut down my Kindle? No, I don't want to shut down my Kindle. Okay. Anyway. Okay, so you all know, I'm sure, that I had a stroke a year and a half ago. While I was in a recovery center in Jacksonville, Florida, I get email from Stephen King. And Steve says, I'd love to come visit you. Because if there's anyone who can appreciate physical therapy, it's going to be a guy who was hit by a freaking van. Right? He had been in his life exactly where I was. Because I had to relearn how to walk and how to reuse my body. So I said, sure. Steve drove 5 hours to come see me. I figured he was nearby Jacksonville. No, he was down at the southern tip of Florida. He drove 5 freaking hours to come visit with me. And as we're sitting there in my room chatting, and it was funny because all the doctors and the physical therapists are looking at him going, I know this guy. Where do I know this guy? And I actually saw two of the people, two of the therapists standing outside my door going, and as I was talking to Steve, I was watching out the side of my eye, and I heard one of them going, I'm going to go look at the sign-in sheet. And I waited. 5 seconds later, I hear, that was perfect. I mean, that word was all over the place, and that was fun. At any rate, and the one guy who didn't get a chance to see him was my main doctor, whose name was, swear to God, Dr. No. It was spelled N-O-G-H, but it was pronounced No. I love it. I go, Dr. No, I kept waiting for the clawed hands. How can you do it? At any rate, so I was going to talk with you. I said, we had wrapped up Dark Tower. We had finished up Dark Tower. We had done everything that we wanted to do with it. And I said to Steve, and I'm being totally honest with you here, fans keep asking me when we're going to start on the second Dark Tower book. When are we going to bring in Roland's quartet, the other characters who accompany him on his grand adventure? And he said, really? And I said, yeah, they want to see Eddie Dean. They want to see all the other characters. And it's a little frustrating that we ended right before we got to them. And Steve said, they really want to see the other ones? And I said, yes. And he says, okay, we'll do that. And a couple of weeks later, I get a call from my former editor on Dark Tower, and he says, Peter, guess what? We're doing more Dark Tower. And I'm going, no kidding. So, thank God I had a stroke. Because it got me more work, so that was nice. It was great. Steve was wonderful. He's there and he says, hey, I have my next book on this little hard drive. You want me to download it onto your computer so you can read it? I'm going, yeah. That was cool. So, that was really entertaining. But at any rate, so we are doing more Dark Tower. We're doing 3 6-issue limited series that are each focusing on one of the members of his quartet. And the first one is going to be Eddie Dean. And I've got to tell you, they're wonderful. I mean, the art is terrific. Robin Firth has written fantastic stories, and I'm having a field day dialoguing these things. They're just so much fun. So I think that's going to be coming out. Starting in October, I'm doing a 6-issue Phantom limited series for Hermes Press. I've written the Phantom once before, back for DC Comics in the mid-1980s. One of my most valued possessions is I have the original art of the cover to Phantom #1, signed to Peter, Mid-Love, Lee Falk. So that's one of my prized possessions. Now here's the thing. My dream project has always been to do the Phantom meets Tarzan. Okay? So when I was going to do this, I said I would love to do that. And the guy said, I will get in touch with Edgar Rice Burroughs people. And he got in touch with Edgar Rice Burroughs people who proceeded to be complete dicks. So I can't do the Phantom meets Tarzan. However, I'm doing the Phantom East Tarzan. He's a guy in a loincloth.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of stuff with guys in loincloths that live in the jungle and not have them be Tarzan. George of the Jungle has proved that. So I'm having, okay, what the hell, I'll tell you. Do not put this on Twitter. Do not put this on Deadpool's Art of War. Okay? I've wanted to do a Marvel Comics version of the Art of War for years. And one day I was talking, and I hadn't been able to get an editor to back me up on it. And I was talking to Axel Alonso about it. And I said, I'd love to do an Art of War book. And he thought about it a moment. He said, do you think you can make it Deadpool's Art of War? And I went, sure! Why not? And all of a sudden I had an editor inside of a minute and a half. And so in October we're going to be doing Deadpool's Art of War, in which Deadpool, rather unlikely, but what the hell, discovers the book Art of War and decides he wants to do his own edition of it. And the publisher says there's 1 million editions of Art of War about it. What's your angle going to be? And he says, it's going to be a survival book on what to do if the world is ever at war. And the publisher says, yes, well, that's an interesting thought, but the world is not at war. And Deadpool says, don't worry, I'll take care of that. And promptly arranges a massive war between gods and men so that he can sell his book. Because why the hell not? So those are my comic book projects that I can tell you about at the moment. I have some other stuff that's in the hopper that I can tell you about. Interestingly enough, I have 3 different projects that Hollywood has interest in. The chances are, I think, about 95% that none of them will ever happen. But if one of them is original property, 2 of them is properties that I've already written. And like I said, 95% chance nothing will happen. But if something does, I'll tell you all about it in detail next year. So, that brings you pretty much up to date on what I like to refer to as my life. What time is it?
You got 15 minutes.
I have 15 minutes. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to field them. Yeah.
Relative to Artful, did you have to write those vampires differently than since they were in a Victorian or fairly pre-Victorian era than the original work?
Oh, absolutely not. As a matter of fact, the very first book about vampires, called Varney the Vampire, came out around the time that Artful is produced. Now, I didn't make reference to it in Artful because I didn't want to start muddling things with, oh yes, I read about vampires. I played it as if vampires are actually legendary creatures. But in point of fact, the very first exposure that most people in Victorian England had to vampires was the incredibly popular Varney the Vampire series, which came out as a Penny Dreadful and was actually mentioned in the TV series Penny Dreadful. Varney the Vampire actually established most of the vampiric tropes that Bram Stoker later adapted for Dracula. Varney has more or less fallen into obscurity, except for people who really know this stuff. But Dracula, of course, went on to become a major hit and piss off Spike the Vampire. What I did not write my vampires to be was that they could come out in the daytime and sparkle. I got to tell you, probably the most positive responses I've gotten to Artful were from people going, thank you, thank you, thank you for making vampires totally frightening badasses again. Because a lot of people do not like what vampires have become in modern day books, with being like, noble and everyone falls in love with them and the daytime sparkle stuff. I wrote another book called Pulling Up Stakes, which was about a young guy who's a vampire hunter, and his mother's a vampire hunter, and his friends are vampire hunters, and all of his neighbors are vampire hunters. His whole community is vampire hunters. Here's the problem. He's a vampire. And if anyone finds out, they will kill him, including his mother. So he is in the closet, so to speak, or the coffin, more accurately. And at one point, I have my hero refer. He basically says that real vampires are so sick of the unrelenting flow of shit that passes as vampire fiction that they tend to refer to it as vampirea. Which is why I probably wasn't able to sell that book to any mainstream publisher. But at any rate, the vampires in Artful are unquestionably badass, blood-drinking, we want to kill you, we want to take over the world, vampires. Okay? So if you really hate Twilight, buy Artful. Yes?
Yes, so I've been reading X-Factor. It gets my box every month.
Okay.
And I'm just wondering, I'm still getting over the whole cancellation thing, but anyways.
Me too.
The cover with the little spoilers in them. What was the idea behind that? Like the little spoiler lines on the cover. I've never seen that on any comic before.
Yeah. What he's referring to, for those of you who don't know, is that every cover of X-Factor has a little line of dialogue that's taken from the inside of the book that always pertains to something that's happening in the book. Now, his question was, where did the idea for that come from? The answer is, I have no clue. It either came from the cover artist or it came from the editor, Jordan White. Because the design for the X Factor covers is very, very stylized. Every single one kind of looks like it's a promotion flyer for Serval Industries. As a matter of fact, in the lower right-hand corner, it always says, brought to you by, what's it say in the lower right?
Sponsored by Serval Industries.
Sponsored by Serval Industries. Marvel has really embraced Serval Industries. Kitty Pryde's computer is actually a Serval computer. They actually put the little cat logo on the computer. I was so pleased. So I think they're doing it to basically make it look as if Serval Industries is actually releasing every issue of X Factor, just to kind of go with the flow of it. The covers are very stylized and very, very consistent in their look, and we have not varied from that format. And I'm just assuming that that's an editorial directive Jordan probably came up with. Yeah.
You mentioned that the Art of War of Marvel was something you had in mind for a few years.
Yes.
Did you have any point of view characters in mind pre-Deadpool?
No. No, it was going to be a kind of like, it was going to be the Art of War, but I was going to illustrate each of the chapters of the Art of War using Marvel characters. Instead, I'm using Deadpool. Now, Deadpool is not actually the narrator. I'm actually using text from from several different editions, all of them in public domain, of the Art of War. The story is completely original, but the text is actually from the book. So for those of you who are actually interested in reading the book, you can pick up Marvel's Art of War and at least have some familiarity with the actual book. If you want to read more, I would suggest you go and buy the actual book, or which you can get for free pretty much these days. Yeah.
Now, who's going to be doing the art for the Dark Tower series that's coming out? Do you know?
I'm so sorry I can't remember his name.
Okay, I'll look it up.
I'm sorry, but if you look it up, I'm sure you can find it out like that.
Okay.
I think it's Carlos, but God, names are getting so complicated these days. Yeah.
A few years ago, you told us about a project you were working on with Will Smith called Kane, the First Vampire.
Yes.
I have not heard one word anywhere about it since you mentioned it.
Me neither.
Okay.
What I have seen, when they were filming After Earth, they were filming part of it in the studio in New Jersey. And I and Mike Friedman and Bob Greenberger, who were working on all kinds of After Earth literary stuff, which, by the way, is all really good, drove down to New Jersey. And Caleb Pinkett, Jada's brother, showed me a thing that they were doing up in which they had done the first half hour of Kane as a series of animated storyboards. That, I have to say, were looking pretty damn good. That's how they put together a movie initially, by doing animated storyboards. Where they've gone since then, I haven't the faintest idea.
Okay.
I would be very interested to see if it ever comes out. Okay? Yeah, back there.
Last year, you promised to tell us this year the original ending to the previous incarnation of X Factor. You said,
I did?
I can't, yeah, the last issue is about to come out, so I'm not going to tell you how I was going to.
Oh, right, okay, got it, okay. I want to know. In the previous incarnation of X Factor, the one that saw publication has Jamie and Layla in the farmhouse with Siren, and they're kind of settling in, and Jamie's saying like, "It's enough, we're done," and that's where we black out. My original script ended with Jamie standing there going, "It's enough, we're done," and as he says this, a red targeting light appears on his forehead. And Layla says, "Jamie!" And you go to blackout and you hear bang. That was where I was going to end it. So I could have all the fandom going, "Ah!" And the editors said, "No, we want to give them a happy ending. We want everything to end quietly and calmly." And I went, "Okay, fine." And I cut out the thing with the targeting thing. Actually, it wasn't just on him. Layla was going to see it on his forehead, and she was going to have one on her forehead. And she looks at Jamie and goes, "Jamie!" And so we're going to hear blam, and that's where we're going to end it. But we didn't. So I'm just curious. So, and be totally honest, which one do you like better, the original one or the one we went through?
The original.
The original, really? Okay, you said that, though. I was asking him. What?
I like the drama of that one, but I kind of like having them have a happy ending.
Okay, so the editor was right. Okay, except that guy liked it better. So, okay, so we need a third. Who? Okay, back there. What's your opinion first? Which one do you like better?
The one the editor liked. Sorry.
Okay, fine, fair enough. No, editors get to be right on occasion. So, did you have a question, or you were voting?
I'm going to make a vote. I prefer the one with the bullseye because it leaves room for the fan stuff that is always out there.
Yeah.
Plus, it also opens the door for you to be able to produce more stuff.
Okay, wait, this is real simple. If you like the original one better, raise your hand. Okay, if you like the happy ending better, raise your hand. So basically the majority of you didn't read the damn thing. Fans freaking attacking. Oh my God, the cat's an X Factor. Why? You're not ready yet! So, did you have a question or were you just voting?
I was going to ask if you personally have any plans to bring Richter and Shatterstar back from the multiverse.
Do I have any plans to bring Richter and Shatterstar back? No. Sorry. Yeah.
I saw they have a new Hulk comic book. It's kind of an anthology. Like Alan Davis is doing an arc right now. And
He
have
do?
people doing it.
Okay, I'll take your word
I
for
was
it.
wondering if you would, they had approached you about doing any kind of art because it's like during different eras.
No. No, they have not approached me on that. On the other hand, they hadn't approached me about Spider-Man 2099 until my phone rang, so I never know. But at the moment, no, I have not been approached about doing art. Okay? Yeah.
More of a story that I've kind of been waiting 20 years to tell you. From the first time I read Exotic.
All right.
I was a few chapters in and I was on a bus trip, about an 8-hour bus trip for Synagogue Youth. And on this bus there were about 5 other people also reading Exotic.
Really?
And first person saw me reading, like, have you gotten to the park yet? And I'm like, what park? And they're like, you'll know when you get there.
Oh, I know. I know.
So, and I finally did, and you get Carpass and Maror.
What he's referring to is
When
that
it's
I had a bunch of piratical villainous aliens, and I named them after the objects on a Passover plate. Because I wanted to give the names that all sounded like they went together, not to mention the fact that it amused me to have Riker and Troy being menaced by guys whose names meant like lamb shank and horseradish.
The part that everybody agreed got got to laugh out loud while reading on the bus is when you were attacked by corrosive.
Yes. Why tell them what horosis is?
It's a mixture of nuts, wine, and apples.
Now-
Sometimes the sweet food that you eat during fast
Funny
food.
story.
So I've been waiting 20 years to tell you.
Well,
that
funny story. After the book came out, I got a call from my editor. And he said, "Did you name things after a Passover plate?" And I went, "Yeah." "Why?" And he said, "Because we've gotten a call from a reviewer who believes you're anti-Semitic." I said, "Excuse me?" And he said, he's concerned that you're being anti-Semitic because they're villains. And I went, "Give me his name, give me his phone number." And I called the reviewer up and I said, "Hi, okay, let's start with, number one, I'm Jewish." And number two, the reason I put that in was to be an in-joke to my fellow Jews who I thought would be amused by it. If you're going to do something that's anti-Semitic, what you're trying to do is make Jews look bad to non-Jews. Non-Jews aren't going to get it. If you're not Jewish, then chlorosis means absolutely nothing to you. So you don't write stuff that's anti-Semitic that only Jews are going to get. And at which point the reviewer said, "Okay, I totally understand. Okay, we're fine with it then." I wound up having to call 2 more reviewers and an irate Star Trek fan. So I am never going to do that again. Anything else? Yeah.
Everything that you do seems to be funny. Why was After Earth there no jokes in it?
Why
That's so excited about After Earth from your panel 2
jokes
years
in it?
ago. And I got excited about that. I went to see it, and it was just like watching somebody play a kind of boring video game. But it was really good. It was really good world building.
Yeah. Well, you have to understand that when for one thing, when I was doing the novelization, I was working off the screenplay. The screenplay to After Earth was many things, but a laugh riot. It was there really wasn't a lot of room to have jokes in a story where a teenage boy is desperately trying to save the life of his father and himself on an Earth that is trying to kill him. It's not really a laugh riot situation. What kills me is I was hired to, and I did, write a sequel to After Earth. After Earth was going to be a movie series. Before the first movie did not make enough money to go on. And everyone keeps saying, "Oh, After Earth was this really big bomb." No, it made double the amount of money required to make it. It made back its budget plus an additional 100%. But apparently that qualifies as a miss because it starred Jaden and Will Smith, and apparently was expected to make like $500 million, which it did not. And it's frustrating because the sequel had humor in it. I loved the sequel. I had so much fun writing that sequel, which will never be seen by any human being outside of the people at Overbrook. And it's really frustrating because one of the major things of the sequel was that we were playing off of Jaden's life, and we were going to have, he was going to go back to their home planet, and he was now going to be this incredibly popular person, because everyone's going to know that he's the youngest ghost, the youngest guy to manage. The TV cameras are going to be following him, and every single thing in his life is going to be in public display. And he was just going to become so frustrated by this. And I had one scene where he's just trying to walk around, and he hears a voice behind him going, "Can I have your autograph?" And he turns around totally frustrated, and it's this gorgeous young girl, and she's pulling aside the bodice of her outfit. And she says, "Could you sign my breast?" And he stands there for a moment, and he says, "You want me to personalize it?" And she says, "I have a pretty long name." And he's going, "No problem." That was going to be so much fun, but we didn't get to do it. So that kind of sucked. You know what? I should just go, if I thought there's any market for it, I would come here to DragonCon, I'd bring copies of the script to sell. Because what the hell, why not? I have 2 minutes left. Oh, good, excellent. Anything else? No? Okay, well, yeah.
Have there been any talks about bringing back novelizations of Marvel movies? Since one, I know the story of why you didn't do Iron Man 2, and mysteriously after that, there were no more novelizations of Marvel movies. I would hope by now somebody would say, maybe we should bring back the novelizations and do a mea culpa.
No.
Okay.
They're not going to do novelizations, and I'm assuming that the reason for that is that they want the stories to remain completely under wraps until the movie comes out. And the problem with novelizations is that they generally have to be on the bookshelves something like 4 to 5 weeks before the movie comes out. And that was okay in the 1960s and 1970s and 1980s. But it's now 2014, which means that if the book comes out 5 weeks before the movies, you're going to have 5 weeks of fans dissecting every single aspect of the movie for 5 freaking weeks before it comes out.
Gotcha.
And that, to the publishers, I guess, is just not worth the aggravation. The only books that they're putting out now are junior novelizations, and those don't have the endings. I saw a junior novelization of Thor, and I thought, wow, I wonder if it's got the ending. And I flipped to the end, and it ends with Thor facing off against the Destroyer. He doesn't have his powers back yet. The Destroyer's about to destroy the town in New Mexico, and he's determined that he's going to somehow succeed against the Destroyer. The end. If I were a kid, I'd be sitting there going, the hell? The last novelization I did was for, I think, I did Battleship, and I did not the most recent Transformers movie, but the one right before that, where the Transformers, Dark Side of the Moon, which they, by the way, insisted that I change the ending. Because they said, we don't want to have in there the death of, what's his name? The evil guy. Yeah, Megatron. They don't want to have the death of Megatron. So come up with a way where Optimus Prime allows Megatron to live. And I'm going, okay. And I totally rewrote the ending. And then the book came out, and people loved the ending, and then the movie came out, people went, he's dead! What happened? He's alive in the book. I'm going, sorry guys. Okay, I think we're pretty much done. I'm going to be heading back over for the last half hour to my table at Artist Alley. So if somebody wants to come to Artist Alley in the last half hour we have and buy scripts that I'm selling because I'm out of books. Sorry.
Artist Alley is closed.
What?
Yeah, they won't let me. It's closed.
No, it's open till 4.
They won't let anyone in.
They're not letting anyone in.
2 o'clock on. Yeah.
It said in the thing that it's open till 4.
We were there right before here, and they wouldn't let anyone in. And yelling out to everyone that it's closed.
The target program also says it's open till 7 at night, but they were closing at 6.
Jesus. Well, okay, then I'm going to head back and see what's going on with my daughter since she's at my table.